This isn't your soft launch. This is the hard launch, where we talk about what it takes to build love, businesses, and everything in between.
I'm so glad to have you here. I've been following your journey for some time, building Tote, and also I know you're engaged, so congratulations. I'm super excited to dive into your story and get into it. So thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. What a fun kind of conversation this is. It's definitely different than we normally go down, but it's like in a good way. I love it.
Yeah, I know. This is a little bit of a different intersection than most podcasts, and which is really why I wanted to do this because I feel like we don't talk about like the personal and professional intersections enough. And
Totally.
yeah, I'm super excited. You're like the perfect example of kind of how you balance both. So I know you're not a first-time founder. You're a third-time founder, actually.
Yes.
Take me back on that journey and like how did that lead to the inspiration for Tote?
Yeah. I mean, I started my first brand in 2019. So I was like pretty fresh out of school. I was starting my career in marketing. I worked for agencies in paid media. And I think I always knew that I would go the entrepreneurial route. I always talk about how like I sat down on my first day of my first corporate job and just knew. Like I remember texting my now fiance, then boyfriend, being like, I don't know if I can do this like for my life. And I was pretty certain that I wanted to build something of my own. So I started the brand simultaneously, kind of ran it as a side hustle for many years. And that really was like the starting point of figuring out where, now ultimately what Tote was. But at the time, it really was just figuring out what problem I wanted to solve. And it was a sustainable swim and activewear brand. So I always kind of got asked, what is your why? Like, why are you doing this? Why you? And I always would answer with some version of like, I want to change how people shop. I want to change how people think about shopping and shopping more consciously and smarter, both from like a sustainability standpoint, but also just like to match their personal style. And it would always come back of like, then why are you starting this very specific brand? But I think for me, I was like, 21 at the time. Being able to tangibly put that thought into a physical product was like the way that I did that first. And then it evolved to now being Tote. But in between, there was an iteration. I was building something else on my own before I met my co-founder. And so kind of, once you connect the dots, it's a very through line and one thing led to another. And that's really why I ended up here. But there is no like aha moment of like, okay, I'm going to start Tote because of X, Y, and Z. It really was like small learnings along the way and talking to my customers and having focus groups and kind of like being able to learn the nuggets and then getting to this point and being like, okay, this is the clear vision of why that needs to exist.
That's so cool. I don't know if this happened to you when you were a first time or even second time founder, but as a first time founder, I feel like I'm already thinking about like, whoa, what else can I, and I'm early stage, so it's kind of crazy to me that this happens, but I'm already like, what else can I build? Where else could this lead? Like, what could be like the next jumping off point? Or like, how does Gia act as a jumping off point for maybe another like next venture? And I feel like I'm already looking at like 5-10 years down the road, like what that could be, like what are the other things that I can build? And it's like a bug that you get or like this like itch that you get as an entrepreneur. You're just like, what else can I build? What else can I build? And it's kind of crazy because I haven't even like fully realized or the potential of Gia, but I'm curious, did that happen to you? Is that something that's normal?
No, it totally is. And I think, whenever people say the entrepreneurial bug or like, I want to keep building things, I didn't have, I had that mindset, but I never had the sense of like, okay, well, what's the next thing? And I kind of, always could potentially see the future of the brand at the time. But it was that mission that kind of like wrapped everything up. And that's where I saw so many possibilities. So, again, it was like a stepping stone to get to this point, but it was always like, oh, I wish people could X, Y, and Z. And that has stayed true from the beginning. It just was very different applications. So yeah, I think it's like part of the founder brain is you're always like looking for opportunities and you're always looking for like, okay, what potential could you go and see? So part of the, being a good founder and like trying to figure out your space is niching down and is saying like, okay, there are a million possibilities, but this is the one I have conviction in. I'm going to go all into this until it maybe doesn't work and then going on to the next thing. So kind of having blinders on in some regards too, because there's so many things that could happen.
I totally agree. And I feel like there is an innate element of being like born with kind of the founder brain, but I think it like develops more and more the more you're in the path of being a founder. And
Absolutely.
like the more you go down the path, the more it's like this like pursuit of like building and building and building the next thing, like seeing the thing
Totally.
come to fruition. It's crazy how that journey unfolds. What did
Yeah.
you learn in the first two times that you're now taking into Tote as you build Tote out?
Again, it was just like stepping stones. So a lot of the first conversations that even like sparked changing ideas or like sunsetting that business were around what my customers were feeling. And so it was hearing their pain points, not just with my brand, but with like the entire shopper journey and like with size and fit and how they shop online versus in person. And there were lots of breadcrumbs that kind of like led me to this conclusion. So I think from the first go around, it was more like the tangible problems that I learned versus like, okay, like operationally what I learned because it's a very different business. And so that kind of set the foundation for my way of thinking now. And like, obviously that's ever evolving, but like it started the process of being able to ask the right questions with, customers, not like leading people to an answer, making sure that when you're going out to collect research or information, it's not like with the end goal that you have your hypothesis in mind that is already set in stone. It's no, I actually want to know what the problem is here and how we uncover it. And I feel like so many people kind of have like the ulterior motive of being able to confirm their bias versus like coming up with a new conclusion and then like building a solution off of that. Um, so that was definitely like the very first, learning was figuring out how to ask questions and how to get to where I am now. Through the second startup, it didn't come to full fruition. It really was an idea, but I still worked on it for probably 6 or 7 months. So there was like a lot of time and energy poured into the idea. And it's a piece of Tote. Like it still is, has merged into what Tote is today. But for that, I think the biggest learnings were around partnerships and like skill sets and understanding what you're good at versus what someone else might be good at and how to build those partnerships in order to like get to your end result. Again, not really like a tangible takeaway, but like that has stayed with me through the entire process. And it also made me reflect from my first business of like, oh, okay, that didn't go well because I didn't pour into the partnership as much as I should have, or I like put too much into this partnership and it wasn't the right fit. So being able to come to terms with, you know, I'm not gonna be able to do everything. I will need people to help me along the way, and I am such a person that I'm like, I'll put the hat on and I'll figure out all of the different roles, but the moment that I started learning how to delegate and also, like, not hold on too closely to certain ideas because I, like, loved the idea of figuring out how to do things from, like, a more pragmatic standpoint, helped a ton, and I think that all is attributed to, like, who you work with, who you choose to, like, be on this crazy journey with, and ultimately like making sure that you're not only aligned from like a business standpoint but also from a lifestyle standpoint and an outcome standpoint, and there are just like so many little learnings along that way too.
I think what you said is so important on a number of different levels. Like, one, you cannot be married to your product until you really understand the customer pain point. And to do that, what I've really found works, and I'm sure you guys did the same thing, is prototyping before you build and just like basically using that as your market research product and like putting that into the world and seeing what sticks. Because if you I feel like one of the problems that people go down is like if they've already built it and invest so much time, they're like, this has to work. Like, this is what we need to make work. And kind of like put that like a square into a peg or whatever that saying is, a square into a round hole. Like they try to fit it to the problem instead of finding the problem and fitting the product to the problem. And what I think is so important is, to your other point, is like finding the team that backs that mentality, because there's such a difference in even developers who've had the corporate experience where they've worked 10, 20 years in corporate and they don't understand the concept of just experimenting and piloting off of a prototype and not investing too much in the build yet, and just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall in the beginning, really, until you know what sticks. And that's a mentality of like a startup developer. That's a very different and distinct kind of like
Totally.
distinct from a corporate developer who's like kind of set in the corporate world.
100%. Yeah, and I think, like, even some of our early contract developers or engineers that we hired for Tote, they had a great resume, like, things where we're like, "Why are you even talking to this? This is insane." And then as you kinda start working together, you realize there is a almost, like, rigid corporate structure that sticks with them, and, like, no hate to it because that has to work in those bigger companies. My sister is an iOS developer at Apple. Like, she has to fit into that corporate structure or else it doesn't work. Like, she's part of, like hundreds of thousands of people who have worked on these products. And so I think like knowing where you stand and like your level of risk is so important. But like me as a founder and my co-founder as well, being able to assess that and like quickly assess, quickly hire, quickly fire, like figure out what works and not like, taking things so personally is really important. But also on the flip side, creating personal relationships where it really matters and like pouring into the people that do believe in your vision and who are with you along the ride. And like we've had amazing contractors who like totally understand how early we are and just like want to contribute in any way possible. And yeah, like kind of what you said too about being obsessed with the problem and solving the problem and not necessarily with your solution in that moment because the solution will change and finding real product market fit is a really really hard thing to do and I think people see like okay that like 10 people liked this, okay, let's keep going with that, and that doesn't indicate that your product is the right product yet, and so that's a huge learning for me as well.
Totally. And like to your point, just putting your energy into what moves the needle and also knowing what you're good at and where you need to like offload because I think that's actually a really difficult balance for founders because our brains are working in a way where like we want to do everything. We want to like move, move, move and go, go, go. And it's sort of like put on us that like everything is on our shoulders, right? We're the founder, we're the CEO, like we're the ones that like need to keep the ship moving. But you have to know what you're good at and what you're not good at and like put the energy into what moves the needle and then the rest of it where maybe you're either not good or you don't have time or it doesn't move the needle, like know how to kind of move that and like get the resources to like move that forward in a different way.
No,
Yeah.
100%.
Okay, so you are engaged. I want to get into the fun stuff. Congratulations. Okay, tell us any or all details that you already have. When and where is the wedding?
Yeah.
But also take us back to the engagement. Like, when did you get engaged? What was the proposal like?
Yeah. So we got engaged just over a year ago. So it was last November 8th, specific date. But we were in French Polynesia. So it was like literally the most magical trip. It was 8 is also my lucky number, so there will be a theme here. But it was for our 8th dating anniversary. We went on this magical trip. My fiance planned everything. It was a total surprise to me. I didn't know where we were going. He just said, it's tropical. You need to pack X, Y, and Z. And then I found out like the days leading up. I kind of put two and two together, but it really was like a total surprise. So he did amazing in that department. It was an 8-day trip, like fully planned every single detail. And we do a lot of traveling, but like I am the big planner. I'm obsessed with travel planning and event planning and everything. So typically that's my big role and he'll kind of weigh in. He honestly travels more than I do, so he has like a lot of opinions, but I just like love taking that role. So it was cool to see him in that position and being able to plan that out. And it was the last day that we were there. We were in Bora Bora. We're staying at like a gorgeous like above water bungalow at the Four Seasons, like insane location. And yeah, it happened. We were all alone. He knew that I didn't want like any friends, family, like photographers, anyone around. It just was gonna be us. So he set up like a phone, like he like hid it and like on the stairs and we like walked down and I didn't know it was there. So it was really like candid and it felt like a very like special, intimate moment with just us. But yeah, we had been together for since college. So like for 8 years before that, we just celebrated our 9-year anniversary. So it was like a long time coming, but in the way that we were we always were aligned in that. Like, it kinda felt like we were married for so long, like, we've been together so long, we were so young when we met, and we knew within, like, the first handful of months that we were dating that it would be forever, so we kind of were like, "There's no rush, this is gonna be we want the perfect wedding and like for the timing to be right and to really be able to enjoy it. And so that's kind of like how all the process unfolded. But yeah, we're getting married next September in 2026, September 26th, 2026, in Menorca, Spain. So it's going to be destination, fun, vacation vibes. And we always joke that we wish, like every time we go somewhere, I'm like, oh, I wish that all of our friends and family could experience this with us. And so this is our opportunity to fully plan like a vacation trip experience for everyone that we love. And we're very, very excited.
That is amazing. Also, my son's birthday is on November 8th, so I don't know if that adds any luck to the equation, but it is a great number.
Yes.
And that's so cool that it was on your 8th anniversary on November 8th.
Yes.
That's amazing. And what a proposal story. I feel like that's one for the books. He did really well.
He did really well. Like, I'm like, I don't know how anyone will live up to that,
Anyone can
but
top
it
it.
was
No.
amazing. Yeah.
No one can top that. What did that moment mean? And especially as you're now like wedding planning and thinking about kind of like that next chapter of your life, like what does that mean for you as personally and also, but more so like as a founder? Like how does that kind of if it has at all changed the way you think about this, kind of intersection between being a founder and now also entering this new chapter of your life?
Yeah. I mean, it is a very pivotal time of my life. I'm also like turning 30 a few days after our wedding, and I'm also a triplet, so like it's like a big deal that we're
Oh
all
my
turning 30.
gosh.
So it's kind of like there are many big markers that are happening all at once, and the past couple of years have definitely been like very transformational for me, whether it's like through work, through friendships, through family. There's like been just so much that has happened. So it feels like a very symbolic time of life as well. But I think like from a future looking, moving forward standpoint, there is something about, and my fiance is also a founder. So like being in this time together and like kind of now reflecting and like the fact that we used our entire 20s to build and like figure out how to be founders and like carve out our spaces in our respective industries. It feels like there's a lot that's coming into alignment right now too. And so the wedding's like about a year away. There are a lot of markers that we like just set for ourselves anyway in that time period, like just before 30, etc. So I think like the actual wedding date will be really interesting to see like, oh, like pre-wedding versus post-wedding life and like what's important to us and like seeing how our friends are evolving as well and like, what our
Totally.
career paths look like after that is going to
Yeah.
be really different than like the 10 years before. So yeah, and our wedding is like a month before our 10-year anniversary. So it's like there's a lot of things happening all at once.
That's amazing. I love that there's these like big milestones kind of all hitting at once, and also that he's a founder, because I feel like one of the biggest things as a founder is like the partner you choose in life, because that can make or break your success as a founder, truly.
100%.
And he gets it because he's doing it and he's building
Yeah.
with you alongside you. So you guys are like in those formative building years together. And like truly, I feel like you've started probably building your life far before the wedding date. The wedding date is sort
Mhm.
of just a like celebration of that almost.
100%.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So tell us what it's really been like wedding planning plus building the company at the same time. Because I'm
Yeah.
assuming, like you said, a lot has come to kind of in alignment around Tote probably at the same time as like your wedding and engagement and all the things. So like, how have you been balancing all of that?
Yeah, it's been a juggling act. Like I said, the past couple years have just been like a roller coaster for me for a lot of different reasons. So, it's been I think I anticipated the stress though a lot earlier on. So, I've actually been able to enjoy the process a lot. Like I again love event planning, love like planning vacations and travel, and that's just like kind of in my DNA. So, it's made it like a very enjoyable experience, which I'm so thankful for because I know how crazy it can be on the other side. But I think like a lot of it has to do with timing and like we gave ourselves a long engagement. So like being able to plan and like to enjoy the process. And that was something that was really important to me just because so much of our relationship is so sacred and like, I don't know. So like that's the one thing that like I don't mess with. Like that's a really important thing to keep sacred to me. And so part of that was like, I also want the wedding journey, the actual wedding week and everything surrounding it to feel 100% us, 100% like, you know, what we wanted out of it versus like forcing ourselves into expectations, forcing ourselves into like, okay, well, this person did XYZ at their wedding. Maybe we should do that. And because we've given ourselves the time, we can really settle into like, okay, no, these details make sense for us. This would be important. This isn't. And so I'm glad that we've given ourselves that time because it just makes it so that all of the like external pressures of wedding have kind of been taken away and allowing it to just be like what it's supposed to be. And like in a lot of ways, I think people have lost the plot with weddings of like it almost makes it feel like it's more about the guests or like the experience of it versus the actual reason why everyone's there. And so obviously we want it to be like a wonderful, beautiful experience for everybody involved, including ourselves, but it really is about our relationship and like celebrating that. So trying to do that as much as possible.
That's amazing. And also, yes, the fact that you love it is probably working in your favor given you're enjoying the process because you just innately love event planning. Not everybody does, but it makes it so much easier if you actually enjoy the process of planning. How do you guys balance like between the two of you? Like, are you using any tools or do you have boundaries where like giving your founders, I'm assuming work bleeds into your sort of relationship and your lives because I mean, I know for myself, I am constantly talking about my company to my husband. He is not a founder. And so for him, he's like, okay, when like, if he was also a founder, it would dominate the conversation, like us building our companies, right? So I can only imagine what that's probably like for you guys, given it's probably a big part of what you want to talk to each other about and share with each other. So how do you manage those boundaries? Plus having like wedding planning on your plate, is he involved? And how are you guys kind of like managing that between like with each other?
Yeah, no, of course, it's like for the founder journey is so ingrained in our lives, like, it has to do with our entire, like, schedule, how we, like, structure our day-to-day, our years, like, literally, there are, like, certain months where we have to be other places, so it is a very specific balance, and I think in some ways, I think people see, like, that we're too volatile, like, neither one of us has, like, a secure corporate job or whatever, and, like, see it as crazy, but it actually has worked to our benefit because we're so flexible and because we can like figure out like what works for both of us, whether it is traveling or having personal events, etc. And I think because we have shaped our entire like both of our lives together around that, it makes it so that in the times that we do want to talk about work and talk about our businesses, it feels natural and it feels okay. And then like there are times where we're like, wait, no, I don't want to talk about this at all. And we're okay to be upfront with each other about that, which is important. Like sometimes he also works in climate tech, so it's like very scientific and like heavy engineering and things where like I have perspective on, but I once he starts getting too in the weeds, I'm like, wait, let's scale this back. We need to talk about the high level because I don't know what you're talking about and I don't need to spend my time talking about this right now. We have enough stress to deal with. So being like really pragmatic about those conversations is super important. And yeah, from the planning side, he's involved. Like he also, again, like travels a ton, loves this kind of thing. We've kind of been not like the glue, but like we are the like hosts of our like lives in a lot of ways. Like we are the house that people come to for dinner parties and we're like the planners for our friend group if we're like going on friend trips or anything like that. We kind of are the ones that instigate it. So that's been fun to kind of like explore that side of each other for like a more specific purpose and not just like a random trip or event. Um, but I think like from like an organizational standpoint, we've had to set like time on the calendar to talk about wedding stuff specifically because like I almost use it as like my fun little task. Like, instead of going on like Pinterest and scrolling for inspiration, I'm like opening my docs that I've made for wedding stuff and like doing all of my fun little stuff there. And it still makes me feel productive because it's something that I have to do, but it still is fun for me. So because of that, I find myself like not involving him as much because I'm like in my little flow state doing it. So just making sure like, okay, if there are things that are really important to him or that he really wants to be heavily involved in, that we like set time to talk about that stuff. And maybe the stuff that he doesn't care about as much that I do care about, I can kind of like go off on my own. But it's been an interesting balance for sure. But again, like we gave ourselves so much time. So it's just like, it's flown really organically, which is like exactly what I wanted and needed realistically. We did not need to add another like stressor to the pile. Um,
No, I feel like if you guys had this being like a pressure cooker with the wedding planning and not giving yourselves as much time, it just would have been, yeah, I mean, the chaos or like the stress that it can cause, especially with two founders, is like the couple is really hard. 2 years is like a great amount of time and allows you to just like, especially destination, because there's a lot of complexities that come with that. And so a longer planning period is so smart. How and given you're actively planning, I'm curious what your thoughts are on like the process. How is it? What are the gaps? Like, what have you noticed that's been working and that feels really smooth and organic and works well? And then what are maybe some gaps that you've been noticing in the planning process that you're like, God, I wish there was a better way to do this?
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, the parts that have flown naturally are the things that, like, we'd had thought about for a long time beforehand. So, like, where we wanted to get married or, like, generally where, general vibes and, like, kind of what was and wasn't important to us. That was all stuff that we had talked about for, like, almost a decade before that. So, like, it was definitely that was easier. Like, a lot of the pre-planning happened before we even, like, started reaching out to vendors and whatnot. I think the biggest thing from like a if there's a gap perspective was like sourcing vendors as someone I don't have a wedding planner, like we'll have a day of coordinator and that's it. But being able to like find the right people and communicate with them because a lot of, especially in Europe, a lot of vendors are like, through like Instagram or WhatsApp or like they don't have a website or you gotta have to like find the back route to get to them. So like in a lot of ways, I wish that there was, like, a database of, like, every vendor that has ever existed to be able to search them or some version of, like, a Yelp for vendors in that way, and I know, like, some people are building that, but, like, I think because we chose a place that also is, like, a very up and coming travel destination, like, there isn't a lot of infrastructure, there's only a handful of vendors for even, like, individual things,
Wow.
like, looking for a sound and lighting person, there's, like, 2 people on the entire island, so, like, you kind
Oh
of
my
have to just
gosh.
know someone, and, like, thankfully, our venue has been really helpful with some of that stuff, but, like, I'm also very good at, like, sleuthing the internet to, like, find all of these, like, inner workings, like, on, like, a random Reddit thread that was linked, like, 10 years ago, so
Oh my god.
it
So
is
that is that how you've been finding your vendors? Like
yeah, like,
this way?
total web, like, total web of, like, searching random things on TikTok or on Instagram through our hotel sending us, recommendations and then finding that person, seeing who they work with. It's been crazy, so I think, like, for anyone having a wedding and maybe, like, a not traditional wedding environment, whether I mean, there are marquee wedding, like, cities and towns that, like, have all of that infrastructure built in, but, like, for someone like me who went off of the normal path, it was up to me to create the web, but again, thankfully, I enjoy that, and that's, like, something that I feel like I have that skill set from work, but most people don't have the ability to do that, so being able to, like,
Yeah,
consolidate it in some place,
that's
or
interesting.
even, like, add it to almost like a vendor registry or something, like, taking the work that I've done or that other planners have done and, like, being able to commoditize that in some way would be really huge.
That's interesting. I did not know that about destination weddings specifically given. I know there's complexities, sometimes language barriers, sometimes, non-responsiveness, but the fact that there's not really an easy way. I'm assuming if there was a planner involved, there'd be an easier way, but it's great that your venue's helping. How did you guys decide not to use a planner? Was it primarily like a budget decision because you wanted to invest in other areas of the wedding, or was it just because you felt like you could do it
Yeah, I
yourself?
think it was mostly like I feel like I can do it myself and I'm really particular about certain things. So like I think I would have even if we invested in having a planner, I think I would have been extra hands-on anyway. So that was part of the decision and then partially because our venue is a boutique hotel, so they have an events coordinator that handles
Got it.
events, weddings, influencer travel events, etc. So she was basically our, like, hands and, eyes on the ground there, and that has made it definitely a lot easier to, vet who we are working with and who we aren't, and again, it's a small island too, so most people that we've talked to, they have worked with each other and they've worked with our venue at some point or another, so it was like back channeling to find that out, obviously, but like once I did, it gave me a lot of comfort that like, okay, we're doing this the right way, and they're kind of like giving us the thumbs up that this is working, and I'm
Yeah.
like, this is how my brain just operates.
That's
So
so
I
interesting.
think
I feel like that's part of the founder brain. I was gonna say, like, I feel like the fact that you're a founder is kind of feeding into how you're going about planning your wedding and like how you're tackling the whole planning piece of your life. There's definitely parallels there. Because honestly, like you have to treat a wedding planning process sort of like you would treat a business or like project manage it the way you would project manage a lot of the different pieces of a business. So there's a lot of parallels there, which is really interesting to think about. Has anything from your like lived wedding planning experience influenced how you're building Tote? Like, has it gone the other way?
oh, that's so interesting. I mean, kind of yes, because we have been having a lot of in-person events for our community and building our community in person. Obviously, you came to one of the ones in San Francisco, and I think maybe it like goes both ways, but learning that people want to partner with people for events has helped with my mindset for the wedding planning and thinking of it more as like I am planning an event versus I am planning a wedding. And that has allowed me to be scrappy in some areas, but also really value like the price point of certain things of like, oh no, that actually needs to be done really well. And like, this is exactly why it costs that way. So I think overall the mindset of it and like being able to be agile, knowing things will go wrong, like knowing things will never be perfect, like that is more what I've taken away both from the wedding planning journey and just like from what we do with community events. So, yeah, definitely
That's
a through line.
yeah, that's so cool. I love that. Do you guys have anything on Tote that's specific to like the bridal fashion space? Is that something you guys see? Is that something you see for the future? Like creating community around like the bridal fashion area?
Potentially, yeah. I nothing that we've like had specifically planned, but a lot of our counterparts, not necessarily the competitors, but people in resale, rental, etc., they cater towards a little bit of a bridal audience, which makes total sense. Like I don't know if you're familiar with Benny, but they were like our co-host for the
Yes.
SF event, but they had like a whole TikTok campaign and like I think they made a completely separate account just for bridal because people are like trying to get the best price or like find like the
Mm-hmm.
vintage version of the thing that you're shopping for. And so they found a nook there. I think for us, it would just bake into our general offering in terms of like, okay, if someone's shopping specifically for a wedding, like we have some sort of tagging or back end system that like flags bridal brands versus regular brands and yeah, that sort of thing. But I've definitely like used our tools to be able to find even like accessories or things that go along with the pieces that I'm currently like I have already sourced. And then like we hear a lot about trips, like being able to pack for trips, plan with groups, like understand what to bring like before you even are thinking about the actual packing process. And a lot of that has come from like bachelorette parties and
Exactly.
group chat around bachelorette parties, that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely parallels for sure.
I feel like there's, yeah, bridal fashion category for you guys in the future
Yeah,
that builds out after post-wedding life.
for sure, for sure.
How do you like how has your partner played a role in your journey as a founder and how has he kind of helped you, if at all, make decisions for the company? And like, do you bounce things
Yeah.
off of him? Do you guys do you like use him as a sounding board? And has he kind of influenced the way that you make decisions about Tote?
Yeah, no, 100%. It goes both ways. Honestly, like we both say, I don't think we would be in this position if we had different partners, to be honest, because he has been a sounding board to me, but like same vice versa. And having his pragmatic, like boy, male business brain and like my more like soft feminine brain is really interesting because like for him, I'm advising him on like team dynamics and like how to make sure that you're like appreciating who's around you and like how to be smarter with your, budget or like, okay, why are you spending on X, Y, and Z when you should be spending on X, Y, and Z? And for him, it's a lot of like pragmatic advice about, how to form the right like partnerships and like don't waste your time with X or like X is like worth spending money on. So it's like a very different set of things, but they all go together. I would say like from a just like general advice standpoint, I tend to keep it high level because like I'm not trying to shape your business or like how you're actually doing the business, but like there are a lot of like inner workings and dynamics that I can help with. And for him, he has nothing to do with the shopping, e-com or like fashion space. So he knows that very well and like is not trying to give me advice on, who to partner with or like what kinds of, business decisions we can make from like a monetization standpoint. But there are a lot of, through lines, whether it's like, he's raised multiple rounds of funding. So like that mindset of like, okay, how does that apply for us if like we're starting to look for venture and, being able to talk about the things he's like farther down the road with his venture too. So seeing like what has worked, what hasn't worked, what happened when he was building out a team, that sort of stuff has been like easily the most helpful. We also share resources, like we have the same lawyers and stuff like that.
Oh my
So
gosh, I love that. I feel like my husband's not a founder, but he's in a not an early stage, but he's at a startup. It's a little
yeah.
later stage, but I could totally relate because we also, I find the dynamic being that what we give each other feedback on, or like where I focus my topic of conversations, is much more like on the interpersonal dynamics or like how to handle a conversation or whatever the case might be. Whereas his, brain focuses on very much like how your financial model is built out or like just like very different topics. And it's so interesting how you need both. And so I think it just also like makes me think about how to build out a diverse team where you have both, because it also just like double clicks on how important that female brain is in complement with, maybe more of a business mind that is like maybe more inclined to where like the male brain is organically or naturally used to being. And so I do think it's so important to build that diversity out, but it's also interesting to see how that happens like personally, in your relationships as like the business bleeds into your personal conversations.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, like, part of it also is because of the type of advice and like the way that I manage my business or my relationships has shaped how he thinks about it. So, like, early on, he prioritized hiring, like female leads and like executives and building out his team as like a very balanced group. And like, not to say he wouldn't do that before, but it probably wouldn't have been a priority. He probably wouldn't have been like specifically looking for that kind of balance. And so there are things like that that I think like are so intangible, but have shaped how the business has grown and developed. And then from the flip side, my co-founder is also a male. So like he has some of those, maybe it's like riskier tendencies or like wanting to like push the limits that I think a lot of women, a lot of female founders that I know at least are kind of like looking to tick all the boxes. And like we've heard this a million times, but like, women who apply for a role, they have to check every single box before they press apply versus a man sees like one box that they have to check and they check it off and then they apply and get the job. So I think like a lot of that has related not only in my like personal relationship with a fiance founder, but also like my male co-founder too, of like that dynamic is really helpful and like it has pushed me past my initial boundaries that I set for myself to make sure that we're thinking outside of the box. But then like there are always going to be initiatives that I focus on as like a branding, marketing, community based brain that we wouldn't have the business that we had because of that, or without that, I should say. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic for sure.
Yeah, it's so easy to overlook that, or if you're not aware of it or not sort of haven't experienced it, like it's so easy to overlook the importance of having that like balance and that diversity on the team, whether it be personally or professionally. And I feel like unless you've either lived it with a co-founder or lived it with like a partner, it makes you more aware. And if it's easy to kind of overlook that if you haven't experienced it or aren't aware of the balance that needs to happen. How does your partner support you emotionally? And like, I'm sure he has, given the roller coaster of being founders, and I'm sure it goes both ways too. But how have you guys leaned on each other for like emotional support through this journey, especially given how volatile being a founder can be?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is perspective. So being able to see like where I've been, where he's been, what's worked, what's not, and like it almost de-escalates certain like emotional reactions because it's like, oh, well, like that's possible because you did it, so I can do it, like, that sort of thing, or vice versa, like, wait, that actually isn't that big of a deal because, like, that happened to you and this is what happened next. So I think, like, seeing the other side of, like, what could potentially be, crumbling crash out type of material. But the other half, I think, and to what I was saying before, is, like, we're really in lockstep about just, like, how we want to live our life, what's important to us, like, why we're in this, like, what are we in this for? And, like, obviously, there are different motivations, like, even between the two of us of, like, what we want our companies to do and, like, the exit route and, like, all of that. But I think, like, generally being aligned in what, like, the outcome of all of this has been is going to be, like, one of the through lines of emotional support because it's like, well, that's not serving what we have talked about, and, like, that's not serving, like, what actually is important to us, like, either let's move on or let's think about it a different way. And so, obviously, that's not, like, I mean, the given stuff is that we're here physically for each other, we're here to support each other and to talk through things and to make sure that, like, you don't feel alone in the process, but, like, the intangible, like, higher level stuff is, okay, making sure that you have someone that understands what point you're at, why you're doing it, and honestly, like, not holding it against you that, like, we're both dedicating the better part of our 20s to doing this, and making sure that there's not, like, resentment for the fact that we're, like, both really busy and, like, we both are traveling a lot and we're constantly, we work all hours of the day and on into the weekends, like, there is an understanding there that has helped from, like, an emotional standpoint too.
I think that's so important because if your partner doesn't realize the time commitment that being a founder takes, that's, like, probably one of the, like, key pillars that, like, where things could start to go bad because it really does take, like, night and day to build something, especially at this early stage, and it could so easily interfere with a relationship if the partner doesn't have an understanding for that. Yeah, it's so important. How are you okay, as you reflect towards, the future of, like, building this foundation for your family and, like, moving into being a newlywed and, like, a married couple, what are you most excited for? Especially knowing that you're still gonna be, building Tote and, like, how do you think about that intersection in this new chapter and, like, what is most exciting for you as you move into being a newlywed?
Yeah. I think, like, because we've been together so long, it's making it, like, a solidified, like, we're now a unit type of thing, and, like, we've been through literally every phase of our adult life together, and so coming into, like, this new chapter is really interesting and exciting, but again, because we've been together so long, I think for so long we thought, like, "Okay, this is just, like, what our life is like, whatever," but now there are legal, like, tangible things of, like, "Okay, no, we are one unit," like, we're talking about how, like, our finances go and, like, what are, like, implications for these businesses and that sort of thing, and it's cool to see, like, why we have buy-in to each other's companies and, like, why we want to advise each other and help and connect is like, "Okay, well, your thing is my thing and my thing is your thing now," and so there's, like, a obviously, it's, like, more symbolic than it is legal in a lot of ways, but, like, there is a symbolic element of, like, okay, we were, like, doing our own careers and our own paths together, but now we're, like, this is all overlapping and will for, like, the rest of time, so that's really interesting. And we want to start a family not, like, anytime soon, but obviously in the next, like, handful of years, and, I think that is an exciting path to think about of, like, as founders, like, what kind of life we can create for our future family and, like, not, like, financially, but literally, like, that we're flexible and, like, both of us had parents who were flexible in their jobs in some way, so, like, showed up for us in sports events and, like, for activities in school and, like, we're there for pickup and drop off, and I think that's, like, something values-wise that's really important to us, so, like, being able to actually talk about like, we've always talked about it in the far future, but, like, it's real tangible things of, like, "Oh, where do we live next from here?" And, like, like, what do we see, our kids' lives being like and being able to shape that. It, like, makes me emotional. It's so cute, and, it's something, like, that has always been top of mind, but, like, it actually is becoming top of mind now, so definitely excited for, like, turning the page and getting into that next chapter, but it directly aligns with our, like, career plans too and, like, what happens, so that's scary of, like, we can't control the outcomes of our lives the same way some of our friends in, like, corporate or more stable jobs can, and so I think being able to do that together and, having, I guess, like absorbing each other's mindsets. But that is exciting too. Um, he's definitely more like, well, it's gonna work. Like, obviously, it's gonna work. It has to. And I'm like, well, what if it doesn't work? What happens if blah blah blah? So being able to like adopt that mentality is exciting for me as well.
I can so relate. And I feel like when you're starting a family and building a business, the business piece is so unpredictable that you have to be okay with the unpredictability while you still predictably plan your family planning part of your life, which is so hard to do because I, like you, I'm a planner. And so that's one thing that I've struggled with on the founder side because it's so unpredictable. You can't really plan it. And I also fall into the pit of like, what if this doesn't work? Or what if this goes wrong? Or what if all of this blows up in my face literally tomorrow? But like, I still have to move on with like my personal planning, like my personally planned life, which is like, I have 2 kids. I had those kids while I was building Gia, right? Like, it's a very interesting kind of, there's definitely an overlap, but there's some skill there that needs to be had to kind of like parse it apart, like parse it in a way where you can plan out your life still given the unpredictability of building a business.
No, 100%. And I'm learning that just even for my lower, like normal personal life right now is like it can be separate. And I think we've built for so long thinking like, okay, this is all one jumbled mess and like we're in it together and whatever. But like, no, like there is a way to sever your brain and like sever your priorities. And so I think starting to think that, but like in the more serious sense of like what happens next from here is super, super interesting. And yeah, I'm excited for it.
It's so exciting. And I also remember when we started, my husband and I started having conversations, like the real conversations that you mentioned, like where are we going to live? When are we going to have kids? Like, what does that look like? And it all starts to feel so real. It's so crazy. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels there with building a business because like as you build a business, you see those like little inflection points where things start to suddenly feel real. Like you suddenly really have a customer, you suddenly have a paying customer. And it's like that, those are moments where you're like, you can like, it starts to crystallize. Like it goes from being this figment of your imagination to like, wow, this
Yeah.
is actually real. It's very
Yeah.
interesting.
No, totally. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel the same way about the actual wedding too. Like, again, it's something that I've thought about, planned, like, imagined in my brain for so long. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, no, we know who's going to be there. Like, we know that we can picture the faces that we're going to be looking out at. Like, we know exactly where we're going to get married. Like, we've just visited the venue, like, whatever, on the actual date for the wedding. And like, it just feels like it's like, whoa, this is so real. And it honestly felt the same way with the engagement too, where because you've been together for so long, you're like, will it feel like anything? Like, will it like, or will it just feel like another day? And it like absolutely did not. Like, it puts you into a totally different mental chapter. So it's exciting. It's cool
It's
to like
so cool.
to see that like something has shifted, even if it's like internally. So it's
I
cool.
love that. That's so cool. Okay, we're gonna wrap up with a couple quick questions. What advice do you have for other founders trying to balance sort of that are in maybe the same life chapter as you, trying to balance, real life milestones with the intensity of startup life and building a
Yeah.
company?
Yeah, I mean, I think like blanket advice, whether you're in a relationship or not, is just like don't rush it. Like there are so many things that because of the fast-paced tech world and like honestly the pressure of like getting married by a certain age or like getting the questions of like, oh, why are you guys not engaged yet? Like there's so many outside pressures that have nothing to do with you and your journey. So understanding what your goals are, what your path is, and sticking to that and not just like rushing into someone else's timeline, I feel like is the biggest thing. And again, part of like our wedding planning and why it was not stressful or hasn't been stressful is because we gave ourselves plenty of time and we didn't like force ourselves into someone else's timeline. But so many parallels with startups too there where it's like, well, why do I need to raise by that point? Like, I think that we should do X, Y, and Z first and not just like molding to someone else's expectations. It
I
takes a
was
lot of pressure off.
I was just about to say that. Like, do not
Yeah.
mold yourself into a timeline personally or with building a company because it's so easy to fall into those pressure, like fall into, feeling that pressure and trying to be on a certain timeline. But I feel like every startup is on its own timeline and own journey and own path. And every relationship is also on its own timeline and own path.
100%. Yeah, and I always say like comparison's the thief of joy, and like it's so easy to compare now, not just with like normal social media, but like everyone's wedding, like every moment of everyone's wedding is online, like every moment of everyone's startup is online. So like there are so many more touch points to compare. So like the moment that you can like solidify what you want, like the better that you're going to position yourself to actually go and do the work and do the thing. So
Exactly. Put your blinders on. Like, don't compare your company to others. Like, competition to me is just noise. And like, don't compare your relationship or your timeline to others because it's like, yeah, stay in your lane, put your blinders on, and just keep going. What have you learned about yourself that maybe you didn't know before you started building Tote? And maybe even pre-engagement period, like pre-wedding planning, pre-tote, like what's something about yourself that has kind of come more to the surface that has maybe been surprising or that you weren't as, aware of about yourself?
yeah, I think it's just that I'm capable. Like I'm very capable of doing a lot of things very well, and I never gave myself the credit for that for a long time. And like there are natural gifts or tendencies or things that have been part of me for so long, whether it was like in this founder journey or like even when I was younger, that have stayed true to myself, and like those things have not wavered. And I mean, part of it is, like, you don't realize that that's special or, like, that's unique about you until you grow up and, like, gain perspective and are like, "Wait, other people aren't doing that? That's crazy." So taking that and, giving myself the grace that I am meant to do this, and I'm, like, specifically in this role for a reason, like, there's a reason why I ended up in this position, and also, like, taking that to the next level and knowing that I can, like, go and achieve anything that I want to achieve, or the goals that I'm creating for myself, I wouldn't have put them on my own plate if I couldn't have gone and done them. So, yeah, I think, like, realizing my not only capability to do things, but to, like, excel, if that makes sense.
I love that. I feel like it's the epitome of the saying, if you want something done, give it to a busy person, because you as a person just expand to fit like the things that you have on your plate and the capability to get it done. I mean, I guess, you know, it is a skill that needs to either be polished, acquired, or kind of like honed in on, but being able to just like tackle things and I feel like you can surprise yourself with like how much you can actually handle if you're actually given the opportunity to do those things and like go for it and take that opportunity, right? Um, so I love that. Also, I'm realizing you have a co-founder. So I feel like this is actually your second marriage because a founder relationship is a marriage. And they always say that, and it is so true. And I'm curious how, as a last wrapping up, like, or as a question to wrap us up here, how is your, I guess two questions. How does your relationship with your partner kind of maybe influence your relationship or vice versa with your co-founder? And like, what is that dynamic like? But also, how do you think about those two relationships? And like, are there things that you've learned from one and bring into the other relationship or learn from the other and bring into the, and vice versa?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Honestly, it's funny because I feel like my co-founder dynamic is like a sibling, and like we fight like siblings, and like we not take jabs at each other, but like we talk in that way where it's like annoyances are aired immediately, like that sort of thing. And like that doesn't really happen in my relationship. Like we've created a system of like how to speak to each other, and like we've just like are, I don't know, we like share a brain cell in that way. So I think a lot of it is coming from my relationship with my fiance, and like allowing that to shape how I speak to my co-founder, and
Interesting.
honestly how like I handle situations with him, because he's also like he's been in long relationships, so like it's not like he's been single forever, but he currently is single. So there's like a lot of things where I'm like almost reminding him of like this is how you interact with like the female brain, and like this is how like, and our user is me, like I am the target demographic. So I'm like psychologically, like this is how we would communicate with like so and so, and like this is how we think through processes and that sort of thing. So I think it's like almost like taking like the patience of like what I've built in my relationship, and like making sure that I do that with my personal relationships and also my co-founder relationship. Patience, and also just like talking through things and giving things like the air that they need to figure out a problem, that sort of thing, and giving him grace throughout the process too. And honestly, like another part of it is just like being so grateful for his role in my company. Like, we have co-ownership over an entity that we want to scale to be a large business, and so there's also like I know that I can't do this without you and you can't do this without me. So like we're in this together. And so a lot of parallels there with like marriage of like you don't need to get married. You don't have to choose to like do this very legal process together. You could just date, like you could just work on projects together or whatever, but we chose to incorporate a company, work on it together, put our faces, our names, our communities and like, you know, our reputations on the line to do this together. And I feel like that's exactly the same way with a relationship. Like you reflect one another. Like the work that we do in our relationship totally bleeds into like our work dynamics from like an actual career standpoint. And because there's overlap there, I think knowing what is and isn't important, making sure that that's extremely clear, voicing my boundaries and being patient with like everyone in the process is definitely like a parallel.
That's so fascinating. And it's interesting you started off by saying he's more like a sibling because I'm sure for you, you're one of three,
Yeah.
which is also amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sure there's like you already have the experience of kind of what a sibling interaction is, right? Because you've
Totally.
lived it. And so it's an interesting dynamic to kind of take into your founder relationship and like learnings from both now your partner and that relationship plus
Yes.
like your lived experience being one of three, which is so cool.
Totally. And, like, weirdly, my co-founder is, like, a blend of my brother and sister in some ways, and
I
so I'm
love
like
that.
it's like I feel like I've talked to him in a past life, like, we, like, know the
That's
dynamic,
Okay,
so
I have to
it's
ask, how did you guys meet?
through a mutual friend. So it was like,
Interesting.
one of my college friends was one of his good friends. He used to live in Seattle before he lived in SF, and he was building like in the similar space to me when I was building my second company, and we just decided like we were kind of like consulting each other. Like he was asking me for like branding, marketing, communications, like relationships
Interesting.
to influencers, like those kinds of questions, and I was asking him for like technical help and like putting me in contact with developers and that sort of thing, and after probably, like, 3 or 4 months of doing that, like, randomly off the cuff texting each other, we're like, "I think that this can combine and be one thing," so that's kind of how it came to be, but very
I love
naturally.
that. That's so
Yeah,
cool. I feel like the best relationships come about organically and
totally.
naturally
Yeah,
out of, like, already a formed kind of yeah, a
100%.
formed connection. Well, thank you so much. It was so good to chat with you. I so appreciate you doing this. It was so great to dive into your story and get your insights on all things wedding and building a business. So, thank you for coming on and doing
Thank you for
this.
having me, what a fun convo.